David. David.
Dave, are you in the fridge again? Get out of the fridge.
David.
What's up, everyone? This is David Wells. I'm your host of the David Wells Experiment. You know, it's funny, whenever I tell people about it, I'll say the name of the podcast and they'll say the David Wells Podcast. And it's happened so much that whenever I'm doing the intros, I almost say, Welcome to the David Wells Podcast. Um, it almost always happens, but I'm resolved in it being the experiment. So, yeah, that's how things are going to go. But it's funny that so many people say it that even I almost mess it up. And I'm the one who's made it. Lol. So, anyway, this episode is. Today's not really a podcasting kind of day. I feel fine, but there isn't like a subject matter that I really want to talk about, except for my ideas about what I want to do in future seasons. So, a funny thing happened the other day, and I'm sure I've talked about it before. Um, I thought that, so I use this AI called Auto, and that's what I use to clean up all the background noise in my podcasts. So, what happened was, I thought that it would reset automatically how much audio I'm allowed to clean up at the end of the month. But really, what happened was it reset 30 days from the last payment. So I'd used up about 70% of it, and I was expecting it to reset when the month hits June, but it hit like May 18th. I'm like, oh, okay. So, anyway, what are some of my ideas for the future of this podcast or this channel? Well, one idea I had was I've mentioned it before, but I want to have guests on here. And I know quite a few interesting people that could be on here and have stories to tell. So that's going to become something. And so funny how like the podcast software works. Um, there's an ad partnership thing which I'm trying to get to, and there's one counter which shows how much you've listened to, and there's another counter which is slightly delayed, and it's kind of behind the initial counter. So on that first counter, I've got like 61 listens. On this other one, I've got about 48. And once that second counter hits 50, once it catches up, I'll then be able to potentially have sponsors. Don't know how crazy it'll be, but even if I only got paid like what, $15 to say like today's episode is brought to you by NordVPN, just using them as an example, that'd be cool. Also, another thing I'm thinking of doing, I'm thinking of, so way back in, I think it was 2017 or 2018, my mom had a bunch of music friends and acquaintances that she knew, and we rode around downtown San Antonio and we asked them questions. And that was really kind of her project, and we didn't know what to do with it for the longest time. She said we should work on it, and I'm like, okay, but there was an initial vision for it, but then we changed it, and I'm like, well, I don't know what to aim for. Like, what do we do with this? But but now that I've got a podcast, and now that um, Anchor and Spotify have like a video podcast format, I think we've got a place to call it. It won't be a part of like the usual podcast. I'm thinking of calling it David Wells Presents, or the David Wells Experiment Presents the Karen Wells Tapes. That's just my idea. If my mom hears that, I'm sure she'll have her input on it since those are basically her baby. And another thing, one thing I might put up. So the way this season might end, season two, is I might have my first video interview. Last year, it was either last year or in 2020. I want to say it was in 2021. Um, I went up to Austin, Texas, and I interviewed one of the last operating video stores called I Love Video. And I've already put it up on my YouTube channel, but it feels like it would be much better for my podcast. So that was interesting. The guy went back 30 years and, or might have even been 40 years, the history of their company, how they weathered all the national chains, and how ultimately the economics of the pandemic forced them to shut down. I mean, they still have an operating social media presence, but their tangible location, I believe, has since shut down. So that's something I'm going to try to drop. I'll have to go back into the editing software, clean up the audio, and yeah. So that'll be cool. And I think I've said this before, but of course I want to try to do audio dramas. I have a bunch of movie scripts which I've written, and it's going to take some of them are a bit more logistically challenging for me to shoot. So I figure, oh, well, the benefit of an audio drama would be that all the logistical hurdles can easily be not have to be dealt with if you just do it as an audio drama. You don't have to get the location. Not all the actors have to be there at the same time to record stuff. There's so many hurdles you don't have to overcome in order to see this project to fruition. And I had the idea of audio dramas becoming a thing because I remember it was maybe last year or the year before that I was thinking about the nature of podcasts and how we all thought that talk radio was going to die in the mid 2000s, but then podcasts became a thing, so they got a new lease on life. And they've skyrocketed to even greater fame because there so many people are crunched on time that you can listen to a podcast while you're otherwise engaged because it's a passive form of entertainment. And that got me to thinking, well, people do love narrative fiction. Maybe it's time for audio dramas to make a comeback. I mean, that's how Orson Welles shot to fame. He did a rendition of War of the Worlds, and there's a rumor that so many people thought it was really happening, and yeah, that's how he wound up doing Citizen Kane. So audio dramas are a thing I'm looking to do. I think it could be fun. What else? Oh yeah. Another thing I'm going to try to do, which is unrelated to the podcast, is I am trying to start up an Etsy shop. So the podcast is called The David Wells Experiment because that's what everybody outside of my work calls me. But my legal name is Robert Wells. So I get asked this question all the time. What's your real name? And I say, when my parents had me, they always intended to name me David Wells. But then my uncle, as a joke, he said something, either made a sign or he said it's going to be Robert Davis Chisholm Wells. And there was a grandpa on my dad's mom's side. His surname was Chisholm. And he was so happy that that was included in my name that they didn't have the heart to tell him it wasn't true. So on my birth certificate, it says Robert Davis Chisholm Wells. But they had always intended to call me David, and that's what I was always known as. And yeah, and it wasn't until I started working at Chick-fil-A that I guess they overlooked. I said, I want to be called David. And I just got called David Robert at work from then on. There's one or two people who call me David, but they're the exception rather than the rule. So, what does that lead into my Etsy shop? So, I'm starting an Etsy shop. I haven't really launched it yet because I don't have anything to sell on it. I'm thinking of trying to sell photos. Like basic, I might do prints later on, like physical prints, but for now, I'm mitigating risk by, or mitigating factors by just deciding to do digital only. So I've got a bunch of photos on my computer and I may have to go take some more. I've got a bunch of photos on my computer, and I'm gonna go look through them and try to pick out the best ones and sell them. Don't know who would actually want to buy them, but it's funny, I get to be my own sponsor if that's the case. I can plug away on this podcast, lol. So anyway, my original name for my Etsy shop was going to be just Enchanté. I'd had the idea of doing some kind of apparel brand, and I was thinking of how classy Audrey Hepburn was, and I'm going to do an episode on her one day. And Humberto de Givenchy, or I'm probably mispronouncing it. Most people in the West know him as Givenchy. I, but yeah, I think it's pronounced Givenchy, or I'm not sure. Anyway, I had the idea of like, wouldn't it be interesting to do something like that? But I'm not fashion conscious. I'm going to compliment women on their nails all the time. But that's aside the point. Anyway, I had the idea it wouldn't be interesting to have a brand like that. So I came up with the word enchanté because it seemed like something Audrey Hepburn would be associated with. So I'm like, good name. Unfortunately, it was already taken. So they gave me a bunch of suggestions. And one of them was Enchanté by Robert. And I'm like, you know what? In that context, Robert feels like a classier brand name. I think between Enchanté by Robert and Enchanté by David, it just, in that sense, Robert just flows better. So, yeah, I'm going to try to pick some photos today and make the shop go live. So, it'll be interesting to see how that goes. Oh, also, I'm sure I posted about it on all my social media the other day, but the podcast is now no longer exclusive to Spotify. It is on Apple Podcasts and Amazon Music, and I believe it is on a Google's podcast platform. I'm not 100% sure, but when I looked at my Anchor podcast thing, it said available on 3 platforms. I think I need some help getting it on just about all the major ones that Anchor recommends. But I did notice that my listens spiked the other day, and I think it had something to do with the fact that people have other options to listen to it on. And it was really cool to see it show up on, because I would put it up there and then say, like, give it some time. And then I went and searched, and I'm like, okay, that's cool. So, yeah, it's really interesting to see it on other places. Oh boy, some of the dogs outside are starting to fight. Um, Even though I'm going to use AI to clean up this audio, you may hear them in the background. So mea culpa on that one. But anyway, so that's what's up today. I went to the gym, and even though I only did the warm-ups my brother showed me, I just felt spent. But then I realized I hadn't eaten anything today, lol. So I was basically passing out. He gave me some, like, I think beef and potatoes with cheese. It's one of those pre-meal workout things, and it was pretty good. I'm probably gonna get that some more. I know for a second, Chick-fil-A experimented with pre-made meals. I think that was right at the beginning of the pandemic, and then we decided, you know what, let's try something else. So we dropped that. I think people didn't like the idea of having to put it in the oven. But it was their own experiment that they tried, and we decided to pass on it. So anyway, yeah, I ate that. I ate some Pop Tarts, and I took a little bit of pre-workout, and now I feel ready to try to do something creative today. So, yep, yippers. I'm starting to sound like Michael Scott in that one episode. Did he ever say yippers? I don't know. Surprised I didn't mention that in my previous podcast. Well, anyway, I've got some things to do. So, as I always say, have an absolutely super day, and let's see what the future holds. Bye.